Joining us now is Freddie Poser, that's the director at Priced Out UK. So hopefully you heard what Theresa was saying there about localism, about having a say in an area, about infrastructure, what have you. But you have the opposite point of view. You feel, as your name would suggest, you're priced out. A young person can't get on the house ladder. How do we square the circle?
Absolutely. I wouldn't necessarily call it the opposite point of view because we're not interested in imposing things on communities. But a huge number of people, and when the campaign was founded, it was mostly young people, but you're finding it older and older groups of people are still priced out of the housing market. And that doesn't just mean owning anymore. That also means that rents in London are skyrocketing. So people can barely afford to live in the city. And as much as we'd love it that every house had, 100% community approval, the fact is that research is suggesting that an amendment like Theresa Villiers removing house building targets could cause a £17 billion hit to the economy and cut house building by 20 to 40%. And the fact is...
They're not meeting any of the targets at the moment by at least 100,000 as well.
So we're going to get even fewer houses. and we know where the 300,000 home house building target comes from. We've known since 2004 that that's been the target, and we haven't hit it. So, I'd love to work with the Rebel MPs on this because I think that actually, clearly, if she's true to what she's saying, she wants to see more house building, but this is going to cut house building and make the crisis worse, not better.
So, I mean, Freddie, I always think of housing as the ultimate supply and demand market. It's all about supply and demand. And I was looking at your website last night, and there was an awful lot there about supply, building 300,000 homes a year and everything, but nothing about demand. And so I was wondering whether you were one of the people who would want to see the levels of immigration into the country cut so that we could actually reduce the demand for houses in the UK rather than just constantly looking at more and more supply.
I think that even if you did cut the levels of immigration, in the medium term, that's basically not going to change things because in London is incredibly vibrant and attractive global city, and so are many of the cities across the country. So actually, we're finding that the pressures in London are already there. People are already living in bedsits and sharing rooms. So I won't be drawn on the immigration question.
But it is a vital question, because if it was meant to be 500,000 homes built this year, and then maybe increasing, you do have to look at both sides of the argument. And added into that, I think we frequently get to maybe 150,000 homes being built for lots of other reasons. You haven't got the materials, you haven't got the people, you haven't got the architects, you haven't got the planning permission. There's so many things going into that mix. So you can't duck out of that. You do have to look at the demand.
I think it's there for, the government does need to have a policy on immigration, and I think the key is that the planning system is restricting supply already far beyond, even if we had significantly lower levels of immigration, you'd have too little house building. So I think the government has to come to its own decision on immigration, but whatever that level is, be it significantly lower, we're still going to need to hit this 300,000 home target.
The thing that's really controversial in my constituency is about the green belt, protecting the green belt. It's not about house building per se. It's about... Do you think the green belt should be sacrosanct from house building, or do you think there should be more building everywhere?
The green belt absolutely can't be sacrosanct because as any area of public policy, it changes. Since 1979, the area of the UK that's protected by green belt has doubled in size. So criticism that we're taking away a huge amount of green belt simply aren't correct. If you include areas of natural beauty and other areas that are significantly restricted on development, 30 times more land is under protection from development than is actually urban land and developed in this country. But also, not all greenbelt land is greenfield.
As we're building more houses and we're building sort of new garden suburbs and new towns, obviously the belt has shrunk in some areas because we're building out and encroaching either way, and so there's less of a buffer between some of the cities and some of the rural areas. But I can see John nodding with you there. You've got support there to your left.
Well, I've not met Freddie before, but I have found what he said this morning extremely persuasive. He quite obviously knows his stuff, and I think he's motivated by a desire to ensure that the demand for housing is properly met. And I don't think that we should obscure the issue by referring to the immigration debate. The immigration debate is important, and by all means, let's have a discussion about that. But the reality is that for all sorts of societal reasons to do with the mores of modern society, the fact that people leave home earlier, people live longer, family breakdown is what it is, there is a huge demand for additional housing, and there is a great demand for more affordable housing. And I suppose really what I would say to people like Theresa Villiers and others who may be supporting her amendment on the matter of housing targets, Philip, Esther, is quite simply this. David Cameron, more than a decade ago, probably nearer to 15 years ago, lampooning and coruscatingly criticising people who were against more housing, said that he could think of a word to describe the NIMBYs, and the word was banana. Build absolutely nothing anywhere near anyone. 10, 15 years later, we've got the same problem. The truth of the matter is, there are quite a lot of South East Tory MPs who don't want more housing in their areas. And we're not going to achieve levelling up and social mobility unless we have much more housing. We need more houses built, not fewer. And Theresa Villiers' amendment should either be withdrawn or demolished.
Now, Holly, I know that your area...
One of these days, I'll tell you what I really think.
Your area that you represent has a lot of green belts. So what would your residents make of the points that Freddie and John have been advocating?
So I think most people would agree that we do need more homes, but it's about building them in the right places, actually, focused on those brownfield first sites, but actually building where there's a need for growth and a desire for growth. So in my area, there is a lot of opposition to Greenbelt. So we're 93% on the edge of London. So we've got a lot of pressure, and I think our housing target's around 12,000. So there's a huge amount of pressure. But actually, it's about having a sensible and sustainable plan, but also focusing on brownfield sites, which actually in my own ward, we've looked at a kind of town centre regeneration. And one of the things I'm quite passionate about is getting more people onto the high street. So the empty offices above shops, using those as homes, and kind of regenerating sites previously used for other purposes.
I mean, Freddie, isn't that the point? That it's about putting them in the right places. And actually, to be perfectly honest, if you build a load of green houses on the green belt in Buckingham or in Essex or whatever, they're not going to be affordable for young people to buy. They're going to be hugely out of the reach of everybody. They need to be built in town centres and city centres.
Well, there are 2 points there. First, on brownfield first, the Labour government, when they came in 1997, thought this brilliant idea, well, let's only build on brownfield. And surprise, surprise, it didn't work. Brownfield development is incredibly important. And we need to do a lot more of it. But there will always be a place for urban extension and greenfield land building for numerous reasons, not least because housing is the only thing people build and need to build. Sorry, what was the second question was...
They're unaffordable.
The unaffordability.
For young people building in the green belt in Buckingham.
We need to build the right homes, but if you build something that's unaffordable, someone generally moves out of a slightly more affordable property to get it, so you get these moving chains. And in fact, there is a good basis of academic evidence that suggests that even if you build unaffordable homes, that has a marginal impact on lowering through the... But you're absolutely right. We need to have affordable targets.
I'm going to be slightly more nuanced here because I do think you've got to work with people on the ground because they are feeling upset. And a lot of it, because I've got very pragmatic people who live in Cheshire, but they don't have the infrastructure and they don't have the schools, the GP surgeries and all of this. And they say, we would build, but until we get that first, not the promise, the never ever promise, build these buildings, oh, it will come, and it doesn't come afterwards. So I think there is definitely something to balance up there, and I do think we have to have a long-term plan of population size. If you know in the last 20 years, the population has more or less increased by 10 million, not only is it the number you want a year, it is addition on top of that.
But Esther, the imperative for more housing is a national mission which local areas need to support. And I suppose what I'd say is you never get the full supply of infrastructure. What I'm bothered about is when you say you've got to work with people locally, one should be working not just with the noisy and vociferous opponents of more housing, but with the people who haven't got a home. And those are the people, I think, in this debate who tend to be without a voice.
What I will say,
that's the problem, they're without a voice.
Different because invariably it is their children. So they do have that thought in their mind. How do we help our kids? Do you know what? We're chatting on and on and on here. We do want to hear from you as well. Should there be national targets? Should there be local say in it? Some of the things that Theresa Villiers was bringing through as well was looking at more money to support brownfield sites as well.
And we absolutely agree with that.
Freddie, thank you very much indeed for joining us. We appreciate it.